as a parent, for the first years of their life at least, you are the gatekeeper of how they look at the world and how they will perceive the world. If you approach it with the lens of being hyper vigilant all the time, borderline paranoid, not trusting of other people and kind of all these things, that's how your kids are going to grow up too. And that's how they're going to experience the world as well. And I think that's going to impact them in their adulthood. Look, the reality is whether you decide to look at all the bad that exists in the world or you decide to look at the good things out there, you're right either way. There are bad things and good things going on, right? You just need to make the decision as what is the lens that you want to look at the world through.
Welcome to the On the Path podcast, a conversation on navigating life. Join Chris Coker and Colin Creech as they have honest conversations with fellow travelers on the path. In each episode, they explore the physical, mental, and spiritual health aspects of the whole self, striving for personal accountability and a strong community. Gain insights, learn from our mistakes, and hear from guests who have mastered these areas. Step on the path, embracing every challenge and success along the way. See you on the path.
Colin, today we're talking to Wael Adhami. This man, I'm happy to say I was able to introduce you to this guy. Absolutely phenomenal human being from, at a young age, escaping political violence in Lebanon to then immigrating to Greece, growing up there, immigrating again to France, getting a law degree there, moving around all over the Middle East and Europe, coming over to the US. Now he's he's married, he's a family man, he's got a couple of kids, and he's climbing the corporate ladder. So incredible conversation. What did you think?
I mean, I kind of just stopped for a second when he was talking about the multiple different languages he spoke. And also that being like 6, I think right now. I mean, talk about humbling alone right there. But obviously he's a humanitarian. He's had multiple different careers and wildly successful in all of them. And I think what's really unique about him is he's had a life of service, but also really thrived in the corporate sector as well. And it's truly exciting to see somebody that's really seen the world, had many difficult experiences, but still shows up and is very positive in every interaction.
Yeah, exactly. It's, the title of the episode is really exactly who Wael is. So you talk to him, you hear some of his stories and his previous lives, and he's a very courageous human being that's really capable of anything, but he's also one of the kindest human beings you've ever met. So stoked to bring this episode to you, all of our listeners and viewers. And without further ado, let's get into Wael Adhami's path.
Let's do it.
Welcome back. How are you?
Me or you?
Good.
We're gonna Wael's the guest. Who are you talking to?
We're letting Colin do the clap, and we were mesmerized by how good his clap looks. So, this is a really, really special episode. We're stoked to have you, Wael. I've known you for a long time. Colin knows you personally, so we're super excited to have you here today. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you guys for having me. Appreciate it.
And I was telling you right before we started, I was kind of joking around that I've asked you a lot of questions over the years, but there's one question that I haven't had a chance to ask you yet. And I wanted to take advantage of that here for everyone on the internet. If you had to sing a karaoke song right now, what song would you pick and why?
You couldn't make fun of the other ones without knowing we had a special one for you, Wael.
You know what? Great Balls of Fire.
Great
Balls of Fire.
Now I got to know why. What is it? Because that's the first one that popped in your head?
It's the first one that popped in my head. It's the one that I think doesn't require a lot of skill in terms of having like good vocals, which I don't. So, and I think it says a lot. The clue is in the title. So.
Don't worry. I promise we're not going to make you sing karaoke today, but I love putting people in the hot seat.
Please don't.
We haven't even gotten there technology wise where we can figure out how to play it, but also the cost for royalties. It's just, we're not there yet. Like, share, subscribe. But Wael, I more recently got connected to you, and I'm so glad Chris connected us. In preparation for this podcast, I even did a little research, and there was some great articles that you had written, but there's so much about you that I wasn't able to capture that you've shared with me. And I know you've shared a lot more with Chris. Can you start off by just telling us maybe, a little bit more about you, but more so like, what is one experience that really shaped who you are today?
Yeah, no, look, I mean, again, I appreciate you both very much, both on a personal level, but also, having had the pleasure of working, through the years with you two, I know exactly what you stand for and what kind of men you are. So it's a pleasure to be here. Quick 60 seconds about me. Born in Lebanon, lived there till I was 8. Then we immigrated with my family to Greece, where I kind of continued my education, went to France, graduated from law school, and then on to the field, right? So I spent quite a bit of time jumping from kind of one country to another, doing some interesting things, very much so in the context of humanitarian work, but also the global war on terror. And after that, I kind of switched to the private sector and I kind of continued growing my career from there. So that's been an interesting 20 plus year journey, I would say, right? But look, in terms of, again, kind of what, hold on, you gotta give me again the question. I lost my train of thought.
Yeah. I'm already thinking, how many languages does he speak?
Correct.
So I'm just trying to count them up right now. But no, I think with that, you think about growing up in multiple different countries, obviously multiple different industries you've now worked in. What is one experience that really shaped who you are today throughout that whole journey?
I'm thinking about different experiences at different phases of my life. There's one in particular, if you want me to narrow it down to one. I remember I was around maybe 9 or 10 years old. So just to give a little bit of a context, back in the day, the bus used to pick us up from a specific place in the neighborhood and they kind of take us to school, right? And that specific stop where we would be was on a bit of a highway, if you will, and it was kind of curvy. So, I mean, I'm talking now late 80s, early 90s in Greece, right? So things weren't as organized as they are today. So at times you would have people kind of cross the highway, but those who were driving couldn't see them, and the people who were crossing couldn't necessarily see the oncoming traffic, right, as well. So there were a couple of times where, people were hit by cars at very, very high speed, right? And I remember the first time I saw that, and the reason why I'm saying this, right, is I remember vividly the impact. I remember vividly, how high up in the air the person was kind of projected once they were hit by the car. But I remember everyone around me, all the other kids, and even like kids who were much older than me who were waiting for the bus at the time, everyone panicked, right? I mean, it's a shocking thing to go through. It's quite traumatic. And I remember thinking to myself, like, I understood what happened. I understood feeling very sad that it happened and thinking about, oh my God, like, the family of this person, they're going to be very upset. Person's clearly not doing well, clearly, died on the spot, etc. But I did not panic. I remember being very calm. I remember thinking about this very rationally and very calmly. And for several days after that, I would think to myself, why was I calm while other people weren't? Although I fully understood what happened and I was kind of, really shocked by the visual of it happening, I was calm. And what that led me to think is that, well, perhaps I'm able to handle these high stress situations better than other people, right? Yeah. And then throughout my life, I kind of kept that. I kept reminding myself, like, I am able to handle these situations with a lot of calm. And what I believe that did in terms of shaping, right, when you think of an experience that shaped you, I think it allowed me to be much more of a risk taker because I just trusted that I will be able to handle things as they come, right? Yeah. And it's interesting. That's why I go back to the experience because I think it just really triggered remembering when I was a kid, thinking for many, many days about that, like, why did I react this way? And I even went to the point of thinking whether there was something wrong with me for not panicking, right? But
yeah. I know what you mean. Actually, that kind of answered it because one of the questions I had for you, Wael, is I'd say going up until late teen, early 20s, like tons of experiences at that point. You're already multilingual. You're now getting through grad school. You had a lot of other options you could have taken instead of stepping into a life of service with the Red Cross. And it's just interesting to me that was the choice that you made when you had some of these other options. And I wonder how much the story you just told drove some of that decision to move into the humanitarian work? You had other options and that was what you chose. I'm just curious, is it safe to say that what you just said about that shaping experience is kind of what led you into the humanitarian service? And I guess why would you have chosen to move in that direction and stay there for quite a bit?
I think that's part of it. The other part is also 9/11, right? I mean, not to get too, kind of too corny about this, but when 9/11 happened, that also really changed kind of how I looked at the world. And, really thinking about the part of the world that I come from, the part of the world that I grew up in, which is kind of in Western societies and Western environments and very close as well to kind of American culture and all these things. And I just could not understand why things like this would happen, right? So I started really getting more interested in being part of the effort, not only to make sure that things like that don't happen again, but also perhaps serve as a bridge between kind of two worlds that seem to become more and more at odds, right? Where I always thought that they're a lot closer than what people think. So that also played a massive, I would say, role in it. And I was always interested in the world in general. Like I just wanted to go out there and see the world and interact with different cultures and learn about them like deeply, like be embedded in these cultures and live with these cultures and understand how people think and react to different things. But I would say, that risk-taking element is very big in my personality. And I mean, even to this day, even in business, right? I am a risk taker. Where the fire is, I like to go. So that's very much part of my personality. But there was also this other element of that emotional attachment between different parts of the world that I wanted to connect.
Did you feel like, especially that early moment in your childhood, obviously you asked the question, is there something wrong with me? But clearly it was also something where you knew that it was more service oriented too, like trying to help people. You saw something like that, then you see something happen on a global level, a terror attack. And then obviously you have a choice. There's a million things you could do. If you're in France, maybe, you could join the UN forces or other things, but why did you choose the Red Cross?
It's the international feel to it that attracted me the most, right? It's the fact that, it's an organization. So the International Committee of the Red Cross is a wonderful organization, by the way. It really is an organization that does a lot of good to a lot of people that are in incredible situations, incredibly vulnerable situations. And I've seen this firsthand. I mean, I've seen for many, many years the great work that this institution does. I mean, it's not perfect, but it's definitely is a force of good in the world, right? And that, kind of impartial, neutral type of mission really, spoke to me because I felt that it was trying to not take sides, but really try to help people first and foremost, right? So I was attracted to that part of it, right? And it gave me the opportunity also to see the world through a very different lens. You guys know this, right? But I spent a lot of time working in prisons, right? And, as part of kind of the Geneva Conventions and the mandate of the International Red Cross to visit prisoners of war and detainees that are, detained in relation to armed conflict. So that gives you a lens to how things work that is very, very unique because these are by definition, obviously locations that you're not supposed to see, right? That's out of the public sight. It's a prison. You're not supposed to be there unless, you're either a prisoner or you're in the administration, right? So that gives you a very different lens on the world.
Yeah. I got a question for you, Wael, so you've seen a lot of different parts of the world. I'm incredibly proud of you for all that you've accomplished up to this point. Right now, this beautiful home. You're here in the U.S. You're married. You've got 2 sons. Like the worldview that you've picked up along the way. How do you leverage that as a dad? Like you've got such a rich set of experiences in the way that you view the world. Like to your point, like not all parts of the world are the same, right? The U.S. we're kind of in our bubble over here in the U.S. and we don't always get to see what the rest of the world is like. But you had mentioned before, are some similarities. I'm curious, like how does that feed into your parenting and the way that you lead your boys? Like, does this come up? Like, how do you address some of that with them that, hey, like there's a whole world out there and, I want you to go see it one day?
I think it boils down to really understanding that not everyone is the same. And that's perfectly okay, right? And what I try to teach my boys is whenever you see people reacting in a different way that what you're used to or what you think is right, 1, it doesn't necessarily make them wrong. 2, it gives you no right to cast judgment upon them, right?
Yeah.
Because we are all, at the end of the day, we're all kind of a sum of our experiences and the exposure that we've had to other people, to, our household traditions, the school that you go to, the education that you're exposed to. So ultimately, understanding that we're very different, and that if you harness those kind of differences, you can really, create a lot of, good outcomes with it. But at the same time, having been around and having really interacted with such different cultures, you also understand that at the base level of humanity, we're all the same. Mm-hmm. Everywhere I've been, parents want their children to do good. They want their children to be safe. They want to have a peaceful life with the people that they love, right? People like to joke, they like to laugh, they like to party every now and then. Like, it's all the same anywhere you go, right? It's just your channel and how you express it may be different, but at the base level, there's a lot more that brings us together than that divides us. And I think that's what I try, if anything, kind of the morals that I try to instill in my kids is, understand that that doesn't mean that you shouldn't be proud of the uniqueness of your traditions or your background or where you come from and how you've grown up. That's perfectly okay. But understand that there are many other valuable things that you can learn from other people who may be very different from you.
Yeah. That's a great question, Chris. And I kind of, while I have another side of it too, as somebody that doesn't have any kids or a family yet, I hear so much now from people of the world's, I don't think I can have kids. The world's so dangerous, or this and that. And I think, having seen just part of all the worlds that you've seen, I don't feel like it's necessarily true. I think statistically versus the news, there might be some differences. But what do you say to somebody like myself who can I safely raise somebody in today's world? What do you say to somebody like me?
So you kind of touched upon it, right? Like, so first of all, if you want to go and look at the statistics, I mean, you can argue that we live in probably the safest era that humanity has ever known, right? Like, if you compare where we live today, versus 200 years ago, I mean, it's just very, very different. But I don't think that type of argument goes far, because what you just described is more of an emotional reaction and how you feel. So kind of that rational statistical angle might not really, calm people down. What I would say is that, look, first and foremost, it all starts in your home. As you decide to have children, you are, at least for the first years of their life, and Chris, you would know this. I mean, you're a father of four, and you understand that very, very well, right? It's
just four.
For the first few, right? Just well, I mean, yet, right? I mean, who knows? He's still young, right? So we'll see how that goes. But but look, I mean, the reality is that as a parent, for the first years of their life, at least, you are the gatekeeper of how they look at the world and how they will perceive the world. If you approach it with the lens of being hypervigilant all the time, borderline paranoid, not trusting of other people, and kind of all these things, that's how your kids are going to grow up too, and that's how they're going to experience the world as well. And I think that's going to impact them in their adulthood. Look, the reality is, whether you decide to look at all the bad that exists in the world or you decide to look at the good things out there, you're right either way. There are bad things and good things going on, right? You just need to make the decision as what is the lens that you want to look at the world through, right?
If I could, Chris, build on this too.
Yeah, please.
Sorry, from all the gentlemen here with experience with families and stuff. But Wael, obviously you talked about your experience in Greece, but you also came from a very turbulent time in a different country. When you think about, obviously, the part of within your house, but then we talk a lot about on this podcast, the whole self philosophy, and we talk about a strong community. How much then does your environment play a role from your perspective in one, with you and yourself, but then also your family too, because you've been in multiple different cultures and communities yourself.
Right. So, I mean, look, the growing up, I mean, being born and then grew up for a few years in Lebanon during the Civil War, I mean, I do have very vivid memories of the conflict, right? And some of the things that have happened there. I remember a time where my older brother and I actually were in school, and the school was just located between two camps that were fighting each other, and kind of the conflict broke out between them, and the school was caught kind of in the middle, right? And that was a very vivid memory, with glass shattering, explosions happening, and kind of all of this. I remember kind of the kids again being in full panic mode, and rightfully so, right? So, but again, I chose to look at things through how lucky and blessed I am to be in a position where we were able to immigrate. And by the way, our immigration to Greece was very traumatic, and it was very, very adventurous. Let's just put it this way, right? I mean, I like to my wife and I joke about how my kids immigrated to the US on a first class flight, on Emirates Airlines, right, from Dubai to the US.
One of the best first class.
Right, exactly, right. Versus how, me and my brothers and my mom at the time, we had to immigrate basically, running away on fishing dinghies and kind of crossing the Mediterranean, getting to Cyprus, and from Cyprus to Greece. So, but again, I consider myself to be extremely lucky because I got to do that. I got to then go and grow up in Greece in, a neighborhood that was not wealthy by any stretch of the imagination, but I mean, for me, it's the best place in the world, right? I had a ton of fun there, and I grew up, in what I consider to be a safe environment, and all of these things, right? Compared to Lebanon, at least. So I consider myself very lucky from that sense. So that's the lens I look at, right? This particular chapter of my life that could have been an anchor that would have kind of kept me, from swimming as far as I want to swim, but that's not what I wanted to do, right? And I have to credit as well kind of my parents here, because my parents were always very big on education, and they were very big on trying to seize the opportunities that you have in front of you, right? So that's something that I feel they tried as much as they can to instill in both myself and my brothers, and that definitely helped. Because had I had parents that, let's say, would have dwelled on the Civil War and the atrocities of the Civil War kind of every day at home, that could have impacted us differently, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're bang on. It reminds me of, and we've talked about kind of, it's all a matter of perspective, while a few times, like some people just have a different worldview. They've had a different set of experiences. So I think what comes along with that is some resilience. And I think for everybody listening right now, they're picking up on that with you. Like having some of the experiences that you've had have led you to become a very resilient person. What's interesting is the positive outlook you have on some of these. It's a lot of mental fortitude to get to that place. So I'd be remiss if I didn't take the chance to kind of unpack that a little bit, because I think this will be really in service of people that are listening. But like, there are moments in your life, even now, where maybe you feel like you're straying from what your goals are, or maybe a bad day with the wife or with the kids or with your health, your fitness. Like when you start hitting some of those derailers, like you're kind of shifting from what to be that North Star. I guess a two-part question. One, how easy is it for you to pick up on that you are kind of like train wrecking a little bit and you have to adjust course? And then what do you do to get back on the path? Like what do you do to kind of get you back to kind of the North Star that you're looking to follow?
That's a great question, Chris. Look, I'll say this about resilience, though. Resilience is a double-edged sword. It's obviously a very powerful tool that you can, have and further build throughout your life, so that you can get through life with the best possible perspective on it. But at the same time, being overly resilient, if I may say, should not make you blind to when things are actually not going the way that they're supposed to go, right? So that push through mentality, I think, is very important, but it requires a lot of, I would say, maturity and humility to be able to say, at times like, hey, I can push through this, but this is wrong. This is not the direction I want to go, right?
Yeah.
I know I can do it. I'm resilient, but my resilience should not make me blind, right? So it's kind of like courage. I mean, blind courage is just stupidity, right? You get it. You guys know this. You guys are elite soldiers. You've come out of the most elite level military training that probably exists today in the world. You understand that very well. I mean, it takes a lot of courage to do what you do and what you've done and how you've served, your country, us, and everyone who thinks like us. But at the same time, it doesn't mean being blindly, just being driven by blind courage. You have to think, right? So you got to combine these two things together. My outlook, right, in terms of how, when I'm having these bad days, you mentioned, look, I have two young boys. Trust me, most days require a ton of energy, and life gets in the way of things, and you have your work, and then you have a marriage that you need to take care of. I mean, there's a lot of things, right? So more often than not, I do feel very, very exhausted. Let me just put it this way. But the reality is one, what kind of example do you want to set? I'm trying to raise two young boys to hopefully become men. By the way, for a world that I don't necessarily understand yet. I mean, I'm trying to raise them for the future world, and I don't know what the future world is going to look like. The only thing that I know is there are certain values that are timeless that I need to do the best that I can to instill in them. Values such as being kind, being patient, being fair, being truthful and honest. These are things that no matter where the world goes, at least from kind of in my perspective, you need to have in order to even have a chance at being successful, both in your dealings with people, but also in any kind of endeavor that you wish to embark upon, right? So I think for me, that's kind of my anchor that I go to is like, okay, and I make mistakes every day. Let's just be very clear, right? I mean, I lose my patience. I react in ways sometimes I think to myself, I shouldn't 100%. Have done that. Yeah. I'm better than that. But you got to do your best, right? And that outlook, I think, is very important because kids are going to model what you do, especially my boys. I know they look at me, as dad with a big, DAD, right? It's dad, right? So I want to be able to show them a positive role model. I make it a point that they see me go to work early, train in the gym. It's important for me that they see how well I treat their mom. Because again, I think the best gift you can give your kids is treat their mother, your wife, your partner with respect and with love, because that is very important as well. Yeah. So that's kind of the approach that I take. But again, look, I'm human. I make my mistakes, my fair share of mistakes every day. I think my wife will be the first one to happily point at them. All right. So yeah.
Well, we're not going to make her come on next and also start listing out, well, today the trash wasn't taken out. And obviously he was talking too loud on a Riverside conversation with Chris and Colin. But no, what I really think is so fascinating too is because the way I met you was through Chris. And obviously Chris had, experience working with you in the past. And I've met others that have also worked for you. And we were talking about parenting, but while leadership might be different, there's also a, similar mindset of how do I help them, but also develop them or give them the right boundaries. And I would love to know from you, because I know that you're good at it, because I've heard it behind your back, really is the truth. I've heard behind your back, you're good at people leading. But how do you bring that same mindset, all your experiences, all these things into a modern world where maybe somebody doesn't have those same experiences, or maybe they don't have that resilience? How do you think and approach, managing other humans in a work environment?
I mean, you don't have to be a child of war to try and be a good person and genuinely care and love other people, right? And I think it's, at least in my perspective, again, maybe other people have become very effective at doing it differently, and that's perfectly fine. But I find it very difficult to be a good people leader if you don't genuinely care about other people. It's just hard, because you can be really good at faking it for a while, and maybe you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people fooled, but it's gonna catch on to you at some point. And the higher up you move, kind of in your leadership positions, especially when you think of large companies and you start managing very large organizations and you have a lot of people under your care, the more difficult it is for you to also hide who you are. You're interacting with dozens and dozens of individuals every day. They get to see you at your best. They get to see you at your worst. You make decisions that don't pan out the way you want them to pan out sometimes, and how you react to them says a lot about who you are as a person. So I genuinely believe that you have to stay true to your values, and you got to center your interactions with people have to be centered around kindness and respect. And I know kindness is a very controversial topic because I've had conversations with people that I consider to be extremely intelligent and very, very capable in what they do. And they don't think that kindness is a prerequisite to human interaction. They think, well, kindness is a plus. If you want to be kind, that's great. I don't expect it from you, but if that's what you want to be, then great. I actually disagree. I actually think that kindness is very much at the heart of how people should be treating each other. And kindness goes a long way. It goes also in understanding that if I'm speaking to Colin today, for example, and Colin comes off for whatever reason on that specific day, I have to be kind enough to think, not today, you're doing great, Colin, but I'm saying in general.
I was like, Chris, we can't post this
I already
one.
took a note that we're going to talk about this, Colin.
Hypothetically speaking, Colin, if you come off a certain way that day, I have to be kind enough to also consider that, hey, what's going on with Colin? Maybe he's going through something personal that's paining him, or that's making him, act this way, right? It's not, when you try as much as possible to put yourself in a situation where you feel empathy and kindness towards other people, I think the rest is, frankly speaking, pretty straightforward. It's not that complicated. What's complicated is no matter how you feel, you make a conscious decision to be kind and respectful and considerate. That is where, and once you've done that decision and you live through it, I think the rest is pretty straightforward.
100%. There's this phrase, you never see them struggle, but you always see them fall. And this idea of just lead with kindness first is a good way to combat that a little bit. Somebody's going through something usually, and that's an important thing to highlight. And by the way, the whole time you're talking about that, while I'm sitting over here thinking, like, this is why, to me personally, community is so important. I told Colin earlier this year, I said, I'm for sure going to introduce you to Wael, because if I think about like the people that are truly in my corner, you both are chief among them, really. Like, it's people that are deep in my corner, that they've got my back. They're great people. They're great men, and people that I want to confide in, and I consider brothers, right? And I told Colin, I said, I would be doing a disservice if I didn't grow my own little community and my own little ecosystem by creating those introductions. And that was why I wanted to one, get the two of you introduced. But I'm curious, like, how do you pollinate some of these ideas beyond, obviously we've known each other at this point, but beyond these circles? Well, how do you go about doing that? How do you bring people in outside of those that are already there, like into that inner circle, to give you kind of that sense of community and support that you need in your life to keep you going?
Yeah, look, again, this is where I've made some good choices and I've made some bad choices, right? And I've had people in my corner that have been in my corner for a very long time, and are still to this day never disappointed me, are the people who are going to shoot it the most brutal, savage way that you can possibly imagine, with me, and they're going to always keep it real. And that's exactly what I want from people in my corner. And I've made mistakes in the past where I've let people in and, I've been let down and disappointed. But that's part of the journey, right? And again, bad decisions don't necessarily mean that you're not heading in the right direction. Right. And I think when you're building that community that you're talking about, Chris, it's a complicated endeavor, right? And you're gonna get some things wrong, but what you're trying to do is the right thing. And again, hold on to those right people, hold on to those folks that have always been true to you and kind of always told you what you needed to hear more than what you wanted to hear, right? And I think that's what it boils down to. I've had, the reality is, having immigrated so many times in my life, right? And again, always that pursuit of a better life, and always a pursuit of, challenging myself and putting myself in those uncomfortable situations, because I do want to grow as a person. When it's all said and done, I want to be able to look back and say, you know what? I've lived what I consider to be a full life. Like, I've seen the world, I've interacted with different people, and, it's been a good life, a life well spent. Like, that's kind of where I would like to be. But, as I do that, I learn to also embrace people and be hopefully a good judge of character as I meet new people wherever I go, to say, okay, these are the folks that I think we're like-minded, and, we can learn from each other. We can grow together. They're on the same mission and path as me. Yep. And I think we can help each other, versus others that I feel like, well, perhaps, this is not the direction that I want to go into, right? And you develop that with time, right? And again, you make certain wrong decisions every now and then, but like, you develop that skill, I think, with experience and time.
You got me distracted a second there, because what the first thing you said that I was thinking about was I've actually learned the most from bad leaders and good leaders, because I saw, I want to do more of that than the bad ones. Ooh, yeah, no more of that for me. I don't want to be like that either. and then to what I was also thinking through the conversation is when you talk about community, because you've been admitting that you make mistakes. I'm glad you did, because no one's perfect as far as I've met in my life today, besides Chris, of course. But the part of a strong community is that you're there for each other when somebody does make a mistake or they do have a bad day, because that's the kind thing to do. Is not, obviously, when you were talking about being a people leader too, maybe they're just having a bad day. Like, let's not make a judgment call just based off this one interaction. I think that goes the same with your friends in your community, where you're allowing others to make mistakes, because that's also where sometimes a lot of growth happens, or that means they are trying to grow or push the limits, and they, messed up along the way, but it's not final. That doesn't mean that's final. That defines who they are. And I think that's so great to hear too, that all of us make mistakes. All of us are going to make bad decisions, but it's not over. And the importance of a strong community that can be there for you when you have those days or those mistakes.
Absolutely. You know what's interesting with that, with the whole making mistake, thing, right? And people, I think you can call it egos, you can call it maybe insecurities, whatever that may be, right? And where people don't feel comfortable talking about the decisions that they did that didn't serve them well. The reality is, whenever you look at hyper successful people, right, in any field, in the sports and business and academia, whatever that may be, right, there's a common denominator amongst, I would say, at least the overwhelming majority of them, where they do not over celebrate their successes, but they don't over dwell on their failures either, right? Mm-hmm. And I think it's really important, because if you over celebrate your successes and the things that you do well, then you start falling in love with your own legend, right? And I mean, that's a recipe for disaster. I mean, it doesn't take a very intelligent person to come to that conclusion, right? and I mean, the history books are filled with those people, right, that just had tragic ends because they just fell in love with their legends. But at the same time, if you over dwell on your failures, one, I don't think you learn from them, and two, it makes you much more reluctant to put yourself out there in the future and take risks. And there's not a single person, at least that I know of or that I've read about, right? And I'm fascinated by successful figures from whatever walk of life. Just read a lot about them, and I like to consider myself as a student of success, right? Because I think you can study it and you can really learn more about it. There's not a single one that has achieved anything in their lives that has not taken significant risk at some point. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, that's what it is. I mean, there's some very famous examples. I mean, Steve Jobs was fired from Apple. He built the company. He was fired as a CEO. Then they had to bring him back, and it became what it became, right? I mean, talk about Elon Musk has had companies that completely went bankrupt and had to start over from scratch. I mean, every single successful person that you can think about has had monumental failures, didn't dwell on them, and then went on and became monumental successes, right? So I think that's a really important piece of the equation as well.
And I'll reiterate what you said a little bit ago, Wael, because I think it's really, really important here. Because it gives you the opportunity to give yourself some grace. When you do hit those failures, what you said was a bad decision doesn't mean that you aren't headed in the right direction. And I think for everybody listening, that's an important piece to hold on to in the context of this whole piece of the conversation, that you really got to be able to give yourself the grace to know that a mistake is a mistake. It doesn't mean you're not headed the right way towards what success will look like in your life. It just means you had a mistake. And to the point that Colin made a little bit ago, nobody's perfect, and we all are going to make mistakes, and we're going to get to where it is we're trying to go, especially if we hold on to those timeless values that you were talking about a little bit ago, Wael, which is another just golden nugget you dropped today. So I thank you. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for coming on the show. Thank you for being willing to kind of share a piece of your story and a piece of your wisdom with everybody. It's just, consider myself quite blessed to be able to know you and to call you a friend and to have you on the show. So I just want to say I really appreciate it.
Oh, of course, man. My pleasure. Same, with you and Colin. I mean, again, both of you, outstanding human beings. Consider myself very blessed to have you, in my corner. We sure, laugh a lot, we joke a lot, but, we have some serious conversations too. And those are always very, very insightful to me. It's interesting when you talk about, the failures and how people look at failures. One of the expressions that I detest, right, the most is the fake it till you make it. I can't stand that expression.
Yes.
And the reason why I can't stand that expression is because there's nothing fake in believing, in yourself and where you think you will be, right? There's nothing fake in that. Right?
Yeah.
I always, when I started my career, I always saw myself as someone who will go and, be successful and have a positive impact on people's lives and, build those friendships, build an international network of friends and colleagues and associates. And, so there's nothing fake about that. Even when I didn't have it yet, I just knew that that's the direction I wanted to head into. And I just believed that I would be able to succeed in that. So for anyone who's listening and, you may not be where you want to be yet in your life, but you're heading there, again, there's nothing fake in believing in your limitless ability to achieve what you want to achieve. So,
wow. I'm actually going to rewatch this podcast myself too. That was actually really, really, really good. While I honestly am so grateful Chris connected us. I know we shared one dinner so far, but I look forward to many more because that was both a serious conversation, but also full of laughs. And definitely, I can't wait to see what you do next too, because it's just been an honor to learn more about you. But then to also, I just can't wait to see what you do with the rest of your life. Hopefully, many, many years. So, with that, Chris, anything else on your side?
No, sir. Thanks again, Wael. And thanks, everybody, for listening. We really appreciate you hitting the subscribe button. If you haven't yet, make sure you stick around. We have a lot more to come. And with that, we'll see you on the path.
See you on the path.
See you on the path. Thank you, guys.